Hello and welcome back to the Free Life Agents podcast. Today, we are going to be talking all about new construction and how agents can work with new build, with builders, and with pre-construction as well. Not just positioning themselves as an expert, for a buyer, but also positioning themselves as an expert from the builders and the construction company side as well. So we have a guest today. He is essentially the expert new construction and working with builders as well. His name is Ron Williams, and he is the founder of a really interesting company called Hoodle. And we're going to dig all into that today in this podcast here. But Ron, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you here.
Hey, thank you, Kobe. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of pick your brain on this as well. I know a lot of agents are interested in this niche of real estate and working with builders and working with new construction home as well. So, if you don't mind, just kind of like let's just dig right in and kind of introduce yourself, maybe talk a little bit about your background in real estate and how you became this expert in this field.
Thank you. So Kobe, I started in real estate, became a realtor, I think in 2001. And pretty quickly into it, I discovered that I needed to have some sort of a specialization. And, which I think is absolutely true moving forward now. I mean, that was back then, but now realtors kind of have to niche, in order to achieve a lot of success. And for me, the area that I got really interested in was new construction. And so shortly after becoming a realtor with Coldwell Banker, I started to really focus in on just new construction buyers, on builders and land developers, and in the neighborhoods that they're creating. And that's where I started to find out that there were some pretty major problems in the new construction process. And that was kind of where it began for me.
Yeah, so I mean that's kind of how you got into the space of new construction and being an expert in that space.
Well, that's where it started, and when I started dealing with new home buyers, a couple things I discovered right away. One was that there's a lot of people who want to build a house, but for one and can afford to, they're financially qualified, but they're not doing it. They're not pulling the trigger on it. And when I found out how many people there were that really would like to have a new home and have dreamed about a dream home for many times years, but they weren't doing it, I got really curious about it. And I started to ask a lot of these people and interview them and say, well, if you want to build a house, then why are we looking at these used homes? Why are we looking at pre-owned homes? And started to discover that there was some pretty major problems with it. And that was kind of the impetus where I started to figure out, okay, well, what are the problems, and then how can I address those? Should I tell you a little bit about that, or?
Right. I mean, let's just dig right into it, right? I mean, you said you saw that there was some problems when you were talking to some of these buyers. Why don't you kind of talk about like what these problems are and if they're still kind of relevant, in the market today?
Oh, they're even more relevant. So, the one thing that realtors don't realize is that new construction and a new construction transaction is way different from a used home transaction, pre-owned homes. The buyer is different, and the buyer journey is different. The new construction buyer is way different in the way that they think about this. And building a home is arguably the most complex purchase that anybody ever undertakes anywhere. I mean, there's lots and lots of decisions about which builder to go with, which neighborhood, which lot, and then you've got every other decision about all the components that go in the house, right? And the problem is that the huge majority of that information is just like missing. It's there, but you don't know where to find it. So the buyers don't know where to find it. Even the realtors don't know where to find it. And the first thing that I started to kind of discover when I got into this was that so there's a lot of new construction buyers. They're ready to build. They're financially qualified. But the biggest first problem that they have is they don't know where they can build. And a lot of realtors don't realize this either. The very first question that the new home buyer has is generally when they decide, okay, I'm not going to dream about it anymore. Let's pull the trigger. Let's do this. Let's build our dream home. The very next question that they have is, okay, where can we build our dream home? What neighborhoods are available and that fit the price range that we're looking for, the style of home we're looking for, the size of home we're looking for, with the right amenities in the community. And as you know, all neighborhoods these days have conformity rules. You have to build a certain size, price range, style of home. And the deeper I got into this, I kept finding more and more neighborhoods that were buildable in my market, but they were not listed. And one realtor would tell me about one, and somebody would tell me about some more, and I'd drive out to them, and I'd see that there's lots available, and there's a developer sign, but there's no realtor sign anywhere in it. And I thought, man, that's really interesting. And the further I got into it, it's just like, my gosh, I can't believe how many of them there are. And we got to a point, maybe a year or two into it, where I told my assistant, I was like, look, we have to go create a directory of all of the new home neighborhoods, every single one. I don't care if it's got one lot and it's buildable. If it's an option for somebody, then the buyer deserves to know that, hey, here's another neighborhood that might fit for them, right? And it took us close to a year just to put this directory together in our little market, and we're not even in a big market. And we got all this put together. We had all the plat maps and the covenants and restrictions and the architectural review forms and the HOA information and the available lots. And this one's got a swimming pool and that one's got a bike trail and all this stuff. And I sat down one day, and when I had this all together, Kobe, now I don't know if I shared this with you before, but when I had this together, it's like everybody and their brother wanted to borrow my notebook. I mean, other realtors were all, hey, can I borrow that? And I really just thought I was probably the only one that didn't know where these neighborhoods were. And what it turned out to be is that nobody really knew. I mean, and we just kind of assume that we go look at the MLS because that's what we're used to doing. If we're selling a pre-owned home, we can go look at the MLS and we can see everything. But when you're building a new home, that's not the way it works, because you can go look at the MLS, and generally what you're going to find when it comes to the neighborhoods is you're going to be looking at less than 30% of the places where somebody can build. And then, so the very next question that the buyer has is not just, okay, well, where can we build, but who can we build with? And this becomes a bigger problem because about 80% of home builders, especially the small and the mid-sized builders, really don't have a whole ton of web presence. And so it's very difficult to find, well, who are the builders? What are the differences between these builders? How long have they been in building? One builder specializes in ranch homes, and somebody else specializes in, high-end luxury homes, and somebody else specializes in sustainable homes. And most of them are not on the web. And so when I discovered this and really started to dive into it, I just felt like buyers deserve the attention. New construction buyers, a lot of people don't realize, are just greatly overlooked by the real estate industry because we don't get it. And so consequently, we've kind of sidestepped it. And it's easier to go sell a the cool thing is, though, once you understand it and you start to get into it, you very quickly become the go-to resource that everybody wants to use, not just the buyers, but also the builders and the land developers.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty interesting as well, because I know a lot of agents kind of want to be, that new construction home kind of expert, right? They understand that there's a lot of opportunity there, especially now with all the different home tours that you're seeing on the internet. I think people love to focus on kind of that niche, right? They can get all dressed up and be and look great and kind of present those homes. So I mean, kind of just asking a question here is, you didn't really focus on like homes that were already built. You were more working with people that wanted custom built homes. Is that correct?
Well, I guess, my thought was focus on the buyer.
Mhm.
And if the buyer, so it really depends on the buyer and the buyer's situation.
Right.
Some buyers maybe they only have a short time frame. Hey, we need to get in our next home within a certain period of time. Well, that means that I got to work with certain builders, or maybe with certain projects where the builders already got it half done,
Right.
or 3/4 done. Sometimes they don't want to live outside of town. They want to live in the interior of town. That dictates which builders you're going to work with and what locations you're going to look at. So to me, it didn't matter whether it was custom or production build, whether it was a spec home or they're starting from the ground. It just, let me find out what this buyer needs and then help to kind of match make them with the right builder in the right neighborhoods that are going to meet their criteria.
Right. I think that's really interesting that you brought that up because I think a lot of agents, like I mentioned earlier, they're more into, kind of presenting themselves to certain builders, mostly like the bigger builders, and just kind of being their sales rep. You know what I mean? Like they can go in there and do the home tours and then attract buyer clients. And they're not necessarily thinking about, how can I help the buyers? They're just thinking, oh, I want to sell these homes because they probably cost a little bit more, less work. I don't necessarily have to, work with the seller, right? I'm just kind of in with the builders and I can go in here and market all their properties. But like your approach is kind of going in and just seeing what the buyer wants, which is, I mean, it's kind of hard. It's kind of like it's interesting because not a lot of agents are actually doing that who are new construction specialists. I mean, do you think that's what agents should be doing now? Is they should be, kind of shifting that mindset and being buyer oriented?
100%. I mean, and when you do, you not only win the buyers, you win the buyers' referrals because most realtors are not doing it. And one of the things that we've discovered about new construction buyers is they get their information from other people that they've met who built a house. And so they've got this word of mouth network going on because they don't know, they can't go online to find this information. So they don't even know which realtor to work with. But you not only win the buyer, you win the buyer's referrals, but then because you're focused on new construction buyers, you win the builder and the developer, and you end up listing their neighborhood and listing their beautiful homes. And so it really becomes kind of full circle. But the numbers, the very few realtors, we started really studying this, and I've looked at it for about 35 markets across the United States now, where I'll go in and I'll study the closings, new construction closings off the MLS. And city by city, including in Houston, every place I've looked, it's been pretty much the same. That less than 1 in 1,000 realtors is doing more than one new home transaction a year. So think about this. In fact, an interesting way to think about it is right now in the market today, over 10% of all buyers will, in a given year, will choose new construction. Now, maybe it's a spec home that's already built, maybe it's a custom home, maybe it's a condo, maybe it's a stick built, but it's new construction. So 1 in 10 buyers, it's actually more than that. Now it's moving up towards almost 15%, will choose to buy a new construction home every year. And the other piece of that information is that every year NAR does research where they interview, or they don't interview, they survey buyers, and it turns out that about 60% of buyers say they would rather have a new home than a used home. And yet the actual realtors that are doing new construction are less than 1 in 1,000. So, I started putting these numbers together, and this happened over a period of time. I mean, and they're not my numbers, they're just research. But, over a period of time, I started going, wow, so for every one person that builds a new house or buys a new home, there are 5 more that say that they want to. And yet one of the biggest problems is they cannot even find a realtor who specializes in it. And I started looking at this going, this is kind of nuts, really. I mean, that there's so many buyers and such a big need, and most realtors don't know anything about it at all, or very little.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably why there's such a big difference between the people that want to buy a new home versus the people that actually go through with it, right? It's because there's just not enough, I guess, not enough knowledge in the marketplace where there's somebody that can come in and assist the buyers to go ahead and go through with the purchase, right? And they could get cold feet or, if there's not enough information, then ignorance kind of breeds fear, and that's how you're not able to make that decision.
Right, right. Yeah, if it's not clear and I don't get it, then I'm just going to say no.
Right.
And you said something that was very good point though too, is that most realtors, when they think about new construction, what we all tend to think of is what's got top of mind awareness for us, right? So we think of who the big builders are, but we don't realize that 80% of all builders in the United States are not those big builders. 80% of builders are small and mid-sized builders who in many cases don't even have a website, or if they do, it's hard to find. They don't have much information on it. And so the vast majority of builders are not the very top builders. And so consequently, as realtors, who are we all running to? We run to the biggest builders. Oh, this one's doing 1,000, homes in this neighborhood. They've got 20 neighborhoods in my market. And all these small builders are going, what about me? And just because they're a small builder doesn't mean they're bad builders. Sometimes they may be a better builder. Many times they're a better quality builder, but they're just not big marketers. And so for me, it was like, okay, I don't want to, again, it's not focusing on the builder, it's focusing on the buyer, identifying what the buyer needs, and then being able to show the buyer. I mean, that's what our role is as a fiduciary and as a guide to that new construction buyer or any buyer. My job is to guide them, and here's what your options are. And what I was seeing was that, in my market, and now we're seeing in most markets, realtors generally aren't doing that. So they're missing a big opportunity.
Right, exactly. And I mean, that's kind of like where you guys came in, right? It's just kind of helping people understand that, helping educate other realtors on how to work with these kind of transactions. Kind of shifting to the builder side a little bit. And you did kind of mention this as well. So if you're more, if realtors should be more focused on kind of like helping buyers with their new construction kind of transaction and be more buyer oriented. What kind of is, because I think we did talk about this offline as well, which is, sometimes, when a realtor comes in, they could be very aggressive or have a lot of animosity towards the builders when they're working with their buyers, because, they want to protect them, and, they want to be, probably even a better fiduciary than they need to be, or than they should be, right? Where they're almost being, aggressive towards these builders, and protecting the buyers a little bit too much. So what do you think the relationship with a realtor and a buildership, because there's obviously they can't just completely write them off and just like kind of see him as an enemy or an opponent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is a big topic, and it's a great question. A lot of times realtors feel like builders don't like realtors, and I still see, even last week I saw a posting on one of the Facebook groups, well, builders can't stand realtors, which is it's not true. It's a myth, and realtors will, builders are out to cheat realtors, or I think what I've seen with builders is they do want to work with realtors, but they want us to be a different kind of realtor. And when you start to interview the builders, which I've interviewed hundreds of builders at this point, and the first times I was doing it, I got to do a whole class just on how to interview builders. And there's different ways of interviewing. One of the interviews we do is that I teach realtors is how to interview builders about what they're looking for in a realtor relationship. And it's a very, very telling kind of conversation you're having with the builder when you start to say, hey, builder, let me ask you something. What's your experience been with realtors? And you watch them and they go, man, Ron, why did you have to ask that? It's like, well, tell me about it. Was it good? Was it bad? And they all have a story or stories. And they all, and I got to say that I don't believe they're just making it up, because they all have their stories. And go, oh, man, I can't tell you how many times I've had a realtor that showed up, dropped off the buyer, and I didn't hear anything more from them until closing day. And they showed up and they're taking home more in their commission than I'm making on the build. And we don't get that, and so I think what I discovered is it's just the opposite. Builders, if you specialize in new construction, they want to partner with you. And builders are looking for that one realtor or a small handful of realtors who are serious enough about their business that they're not just going to do one transaction with you. They're going to be doing a lot of transactions with you.
Right. They're looking for a partner in business. Essentially, that's what I'm hearing.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what they should be looking for. Because I mean, you said something kind of in there as well. It's like this particular situation, the builder is making less than uh, the realtor commission on that build. I mean, that's insane to think about because of the amount of risk that the builder is taking, the amount of investment they're putting into a build versus what a realtor does, especially this particular one in this example where they're kind of coming in and just dropping off the buyer and not doing anything. I mean, of course, it will make sense for builders to not like realtors if that makes sense. If every single realtor they've ever dealt with is that type of person where they're coming in making the money and not doing anything. So I
Well,
think
and I'm not,
it's up to us to change.
yeah, I'm not saying they're all like that, but
Right.
you hear the story enough that you know that that's got to be true. And I think what happens is, and a lot of times realtors will ask me, because now we're training realtors all over the country how to start a new construction niche. And a lot of times realtors will say, well, I don't really know what value I provide in the new construction transaction. And I'm kind of like, well, all right, first of all, we got to discuss, if we don't know that we're providing value, then we're probably not, right? And there is a huge amount of value that you can and should provide. It's not harder, it's just different. It's a different approach. And when and so what happens is a lot of times realtors, as you mentioned earlier, they kind of take a defensive approach. And so they take one of two angles on it. They either drop the person off and then they show up at the closing table. They really didn't provide much value or any value through the whole process. And now, hey, I'm here, where's my check? And I guess that's okay, but you've basically shown the buyer and the builder that you didn't provide any value other than just introduce them. And that's not what either one of them want. They want a guide in this process. The other thing is that a lot of times out of that same lack of confidence in my role in the new construction transaction, you'll see realtors come in and they try to strong arm the builder, where they're doing just the opposite. Well, I'm going to show how bad this builder is. And it's like they're trying to beat up on the builder and negotiate too hard on things that the builder can't give away because they've got to pay for the product and they've still got to pay their workers and for the land and all that stuff. And so there's kind of a balance here. And I kind of think that the ideal is become an intermediary in the process where, I'm trying to line up this buyer to make sure they've got the right neighborhood, they've got the right builder, they've got the right mortgage. That's another thing the buyers can't find. And most of the time, realtors don't know who the new construction mortgage people are in any market. And what are the mortgage tools that are available? What are the financing tools? And so when you start to understand this, you become invaluable in the process where the buyers and the builders and the developers and everybody else, they just love you for it. And you just do more and more and more of those transactions.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's probably similar to just kind of being a traditional transaction as well. If you're not providing the value, you're kind of that's why people are, even in traditional transactions, there's people that think realtors make too much money, and that's because they're just kind of opening doors and not doing much during that entire process, and they kind of overpromised and under delivered on what they promised. So yeah.
Yeah, but once you do it and you learn how to do it, it becomes just an ongoing feeder system, really, because when you start to learn how to align with the builders and what I kind of think of it as becoming a builder marketing partner, which they really, really want. When you learn how to do that, then they'll begin to go, hey, Kobe, why, we've got this new phase in our neighborhood, or we're starting a new neighborhood. Why don't you go ahead and list it? And you move from chasing them to where you become more like your position, more like a consultant and an advisor, and really helping them to achieve what they want to achieve. And then they want to focus on building their homes and building their neighborhoods. They really don't want to mess around with internet and social media and web pages and all that. They want somebody else to do that for them. And that's what they're looking for us to do as realtors.
Yeah, I mean that's what a lot of realtors are good at doing too. So I mean, just maybe time to kind of step up, right? If you want to be a new construction specialist, and I think it's really funny that a lot of realtors try to strong arm builders in this process, and they want to be like they say that they want to be a specialist in new construction, but they're like making enemies out of all the builders that they're ever working with in that process. So, like, how's that ever going to work, right?
It's
It just
not.
doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. And maybe they can start their own building company and that try it out for themselves. But kind of shifting a little bit here, I know a lot of people listening to this might have this question, and because there's plenty of new agents who will listen to this or see this. But if you're brand new into the real estate industry, how should they kind of approach this, right? If they wanted to be, in new construction, or be this new construction expert, but they're brand new, they haven't had any experience in the past. Should they just jump right into this and start focusing on this niche, or should they kind of like get their feet wet in just some other transactions as well, and maybe like move slower into this? I think most people want to know this because most ambitious kind of new realtors want to jump into this immediately, but they have that kind of limiting belief. So I mean, my question to you is that truth, or is that something that people would just make up in their minds, where they should try something else first before they jump into new construction?
Well, I think I've worked with realtors that are like getting their license next week,
Mhm.
and other ones that have been doing it for 17 or 20 years.
Right.
And uh, most realtors would like to know about new construction. And if you're like brand new, like I don't have my business cards yet, I'm not lined up with a brokerage,
Yeah.
go take care of that first. Get your signs, get your business card, get your basic foundation in place. Once that's true, I really don't see any reason why not to start a new construction if you want to do new construction. And in some ways, it's actually better because one of the myths is that a lot of realtors will say, well, builders only want to work with realtors that are very, very experienced in new construction. It's not. That's another myth, or builders want to work with realtors that have big teams or they've got big marketing budgets. I've never found that to be true. I've worked with literally, realtor that's been a realtor many times, that maybe it's been doing it for 6 months or a year, and they jump into it and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that there was, it's just changing the way that we're approaching it. And we approach a new way, and all of a sudden you go from not knowing anything about new construction to very quickly you pretty much can outpace everybody else in your market because nobody else is doing it, and you start to move into a role where you really are doing a lot of listings. So now as far as how to do it, I think one of the first things that I teach realtors to do is, if you decide that you want to get into new construction, the first thing to do is to start to understand your market. Really, what is your market? And new construction it's different than selling a used home or pre-owned homes, right? You need to start to understand the size and the scope of your market. You can do that pretty quickly, and I can show somebody how to do it. But what I would tell any realtor, and the way that we're training realtors now, if you want to do new construction, you're in some market. First thing you want to find out was really 5 numbers. You know, how many builders are there roughly in my market? And you wouldn't believe, Kobe, how far off most realtors are. I talked to a realtor not too long ago in Texas. I won't say where, but
Yeah.
one of the major Texas markets, maybe yours. And and he said he wanted to get into new construction. And I said, but I could tell he hadn't really studied a whole lot. And that was all right. Most realtors haven't. But he said to me, he said, well, there's only 22 builders in my market, in the Houston market. And I'm like, no, there's not. And if we don't, the truth is there's probably around 5,000 builders in the Houston market. So we need to know, how many builders are there? How many new home neighborhoods are there? Not that we have to have exact number, but we want to start to gauge, what the options are for the buyer. How many new construction buyers are there? And then, how many realtors are there in my market, and how many realtors are there that specialize in new homes? And I can show somebody how to find that information in a matter of a few hours, but yet nobody really knows it. It's kind of crazy, that here we are, we are the go-to as realtors for real estate. And when it comes to something as big and huge as new construction, and we're completely clueless about it. And so I
Right.
think that's the first thing. Start to get a gauge on your market. When you do that, automatically you start to talk about it differently. You start to plan differently. You start to realize, well, okay, if there's 3,000 or 4,000 builders, then the next thing is, well, which ones do I want to work with? And so that's the next thing, is to start to identify, well, where do I want my niche to be within new construction? And even within new construction, there's probably 30 different niches within that you could just take one or two of those and you can dominate that space very quickly.
Yeah, I think from what I heard a lot, it's just like realtors are not able to kind of be that expert is because of a lack of information, and just and like I said, it's just ignorance, right? It's not that they're not trying to get that information. Well, I mean, I guess some people are. They're just plain lazy, but a lot of it is just the information is kind of not out there in a space where it's very easily accessible. It's not talked about on YouTube and social media every single day like some of these other topics are. So yeah, I mean, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing with Hoodle. It's very interesting from what I've heard, and how you guys kind of fill that gap as well. Because I mean, this is definitely a gap that from this conversation, is definitely a gap there.
Well, and thanks. Yeah. So what happened with me, Kobe, was I was specialized in new construction, and decided that's all I was going to do. I was going to work with builders. I'm going to work with the neighborhood developers and new construction buyers, and that was it. And I started to get into it, and I was getting some activity, but one of the problems I still faced was that I really wasn't providing anything different than any of the other realtors. And one of the mistakes that realtors make a lot of times with builders is they go to the builders and they're focused on, how do I get to the listing? How do I get to the transaction? I tell realtors all the time, stop thinking about the transaction, start thinking about the relationship. Stop thinking about selling them on how wonderful that I am and how I'm bigger and better than all the other realtors, and start focusing on learning their business. Stop selling, start learning. Stop focusing on the big builders. Not that you can't work with big builders, but they're a lot harder for you to close than a small or mid-sized builders, right? So you want to begin to rethink the way you're going after it. And for me, what I discovered was that, and I probably made the same mistakes that everybody else did, going in and, well, I'm bigger at this, I'm better, I'm part of a bigger brokerage. They don't want to hear that. That is not what they need to hear. If you want to do new construction and really anything in real estate, you need to position yourself as new and different. And it has to be true. I mean, you can't just say, well, I've got something new, or I am new, or I'm different than everybody else. You really have to actually have something different or be different. And for me, what I discovered was a lot of these builders needed help with their web marketing. And so what happened was, we created this website. We got into this for a couple of years, and started to go, okay, well, buyers need to find the neighborhoods and they need to know who the builders are. And so I started a website. I am very non-techy, but I hired a team of programmers. And I said, I want you to create a website where buyers can go on in our market and they can see any new home neighborhood. I don't care if it's got one lot or if it's got 100 lots. I don't care if it's in the city or if it's out in the woods, if it's listed or if it's not listed. It doesn't matter. They just need to be able to see all their neighborhood options and then quickly drill down to the ones that are where they want to build. And we called the website Hoodle, which is kind of a goofy name. I remember coming in and telling the cool banker agents, people falling off their chair laughing, what the heck is that? But it actually has a meaning. It's Hoodle is a mashup of neighborhood and Google, right? So we want to create a search tool where buyers could go and search for any neighborhood and say, okay, if you want to build a $500,000 house and you want a tennis court in the neighborhood, and you want to be in such and such a school district, and you want to be near a library for the kids, you can quickly filter down to those neighborhoods And then from there, start to see, well, which builders are available to build in this area or in this neighborhood, and click through and start to look at who the builders are and what are their different floor plans and what kind of products are they using, and the price range and how long have they been building. And so what happened was, Kobe, we started this in Champaign, and pretty quickly, um, you know, I got invited to meet one of the very top leaders of Coldwell Banker, probably the top guy in Coldwell Banker at the time, who was the CEO of Coldwell Banker Worldwide. And um, we showed him what we were doing, and he said, I've never seen this before. And so we started to see, not only from the real estate industry, but also from the home. We had a very similar type of experience early on in the home building industry, which the local home building association asked us to come in and share what we were doing with Hoodle, and builders started going, Ron, this is a problem all over the United States. This needs to be in every market. And so the first few years, we just kind of played it close to the vest, didn't really do much about it. I went ahead and acted as a realtor, but then a couple of years ago, we started having, and there were a couple of realtors that were using, and then before COVID hit, people were starting to ask, hey, can I do this here? Can I do it there? And we started opening it up in Indianapolis, and it just started taking off. And we actually start Hoodle in every market with the realtors. So the realtors on Hoodle kind of are at the centerpiece of the whole process. You have access to attracting new construction buyers. You can connect with builders. You can connect with land developers. You join a private community of other realtors that specialize in new construction, and you're going through training every single week. Week in, week out, we've got guest speakers and trainers that come in, and I do a lot of training every week, and show realtors how to go from step one to step Z. How do I, wherever I'm starting, how do I leverage these tools and begin to quickly move forward with my relationships with builders and developers and new construction buyers? Did I answer your question? Did I go
Yeah,
off
you
left field
did.
someplace? I don't know.
You did. I was really interesting because I wanted you to talk a little bit more about Hoodle and just what it did, and essentially kind of introduce this. Because I hadn't heard of it before I met you, and I'm sure there's plenty of other realtors out there as well who haven't heard of it. So I just want to kind of have you explain it, and that's exactly what you did. But kind of like moving more into that direction as well and digging deeper into what it does. Do you guys help realtors with like marketing? Like when I say help, do you teach? Because there's probably a lot of realtors that want to do new construction, and they're willing to learn, and they're going to learn all this information, but they have no idea how to market it, right? What do you like? Do you guys teach like best practices, or like do you have an opinion on best practices? Is it social media? Is it word of mouth?
Um,
Combination?
yeah, everybody's got something. There are things that work better or worse, and it kind of depends on the realtor and their market that they're in and what you like. Some people like doing video, and their big win is doing video. Some are, and a lot of realtors are intimidated about going and talking to the builders. And so, but we start with everybody and start showing you, first of all, how do you gauge your market very quickly and start to get a handle on whether I'm in Denver or I'm in Houston or DC or wherever, what is the size and scope of my market? And then how do I begin to identify, well, which builders do I want to work with? So that's one side of it, and start to segment the builders, and how do I get my foot in the door with them? And a lot of realtors are dealing with some pretty fundamental questions like, well, where do I find the builders? Where do I find the neighborhoods? And it's kind of interesting that here we are trying to be at the center of this transaction, and we don't even know that information or how to gather it. And so we teach all those things, but then other ones are, people are like, well, how do I interview a builder? How do I add value to the builder? How do I find out their pain points? And the same thing is true with the buyers. How do I discover the new construction buyers, and how do I get in front of them and get them to come to me? And so we use very much attraction kind of marketing and what we call consultative selling. It's a much different approach than chase. You're finding out how to meet the new construction buyer in their journey wherever they are. If they're just at the start of their journey, or if they're halfway in and they're trying to figure out, do I go with this builder, that builder? how do you step into that journey and meet them where they are and begin to add value and attract more and more new construction buyers?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if you have that kind of information as well, I mean, like we're just talking about, you already separate yourself from the majority of people or real estate agents out there who don't have that information or pretend to have that information when they actually don't have any expertise in that subject at all. So,
It's kind of shocking sometimes how, to me even, I learned this myself when I started Hoodle. um, I went from being, just another realtor to where I started listing entire neighborhoods and phases of neighborhoods. And, and it's a lot of work. And you start putting 30 or 50 lots on the
mhm.
MLS and all the paperwork that goes with it. And you start to attract a higher volume of buyers and you're listing multiple new construction homes. It's a lot of work. And pretty quickly you start to make this choice to, okay, do I want to build a team, or, am I going to stay a solo agent? But it's, even with that, I mean, it's been shocking for me to see how many realtors that we've worked with, some of them brand new, 6 months or a year in the business, that will start to apply these strategies and these techniques. And it's not hard to do. It's just different. It's a different approach. But so many realtors will call me back and go, and I've had other realtors been doing it for 17 or 20 years going, oh my gosh, I had no clue that I could get my foot in the door and build these relationships with these builders, and that the builders wanted to work with me like this. And so many stories I could share with you, that where a realtor goes out and meets with the builder and they call me up and go, you're not gonna believe what happened. I just went out and met with the builder for the first time and I walked out with a listing for $500,000. And that just doesn't, you know, at least for me, it didn't happen that way. But now as Hoodle gets bigger and bigger and we become noticed and people want it and the builders want it, it's just faster and faster. And now I got builders that reach out to me and call me up and say, hey, I'm in the such and such a market, and are there any Hoodle affiliate realtors in my market? And how do I find a Hoodle realtor? And I didn't get that at first, until 4 or 5 times into it. And, I started to realize that the builders are seeing a difference in new construction and Hoodle affiliate realtors than regular realtors. And so they're looking for realtors who truly specialize and are learning new construction.
Right. And that's powerful, right? Because like when the builders start recognizing that, then that mean it becomes something that's like, they start recognizing it as well. And we were just talking about they want to work with certain types of realtors. And this is able to provide them with that, essentially that type of realtor, that type of person that they actually want to work with. I mean, have you seen that from the buyer side as well, where buyers will say, "Oh, this, you know, we're seeing a difference," or has that kind of been a little bit different because just of the way that it's set up?
No, yeah, I've seen it from the buyer side too. I had a buyer that reached out to me not too long ago on the website, and got on the phone with the guy, and he said, I've been looking for this for years. He said he was a military family, and he said they move from one base to another. And he said every place we've gone, we've wanted to build a new home. And this is something I discovered too that really surprised me. But I've heard it enough times now, I know it's true. He said every place we go, we want to build, and realtors will tell us, it's too hard, it's too difficult, don't bother with it. There's this house over here we can get you into. And so we haven't done it. And the other thing that I learned was that a lot of realtors are, I don't say steering, I think that's a wrong, legal word, but they're persuading builders
Mhm.
or dissuading buyers from building a new house because the realtor doesn't know anything about it. And so if the realtor, or a lot of times realtors like, well, I won't get my commission in time, and to me, it's like, it doesn't really matter. What I want is, if I'm really going to be a guide and a fiduciary, if that's what they want, I need to be able to step into that game or refer them to somebody who is willing to do that. But yeah, there's a lot of buyers that they, and one of the things we found about new construction buyers, they want somebody to be their guide. They want somebody to hold their hand. And when you or lock arms with them through this process, and I teach realtors how to begin to interview buyers, there's like 4 questions that we'll ask. And when you start to ask these 4 questions to buyers, you'll find that many of your existing buyers that you've already worked with or are working with, when you start to ask them these 4 questions, many of them will go, yeah, we would love to have a new home. And I didn't know it, as a realtor. And so, when we start to ask those questions, we find out there's a lot of new construction buyers that they think that most realtors don't want to do new construction. So yeah, I think it's true on both sides.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if the realtor doesn't know how to do it, and I mean, they're the expert, and I mean, it's probably it's pretty surprising now that I've like before I became an agent and got into the industry. We just thought, hey, everybody who's licensed, they're the expert. We just go to them; they should know all the answers, right? Getting into it, knowing a couple of realtors, not the case at all. Unfortunately, but there's plenty of people who don't know things, and there's ways and means of just kind of steering, or like, I guess not steering, but like getting their clients to do something that will benefit them either more on like a pride or ego side, or on a commission side as well. There's definitely ways that people have are doing this, and people do this all the time. So that's I mean, it's unfortunate, but I mean that's kind of where education comes in, right? If you have the education, or if you know somebody who has the education, then you don't have to continue doing that, because now you can solve that problem, close the deal, and make the commission, or save your pride, or whatever
Yeah.
realtors are trying to do. So
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things too, we've gone through this last 18 or 24 months or whatever of COVID. And by the way, new construction buyer side is skyrocketing. There are more and more people that are choosing new, that want new construction. There's still no more realtors as a whole. I mean, it's the number of realtors that specialize and are doing, let's say more than one new home transaction a year is so thin. There's just so few realtors. It's like a wide open space. But the number of new construction buyers is going up. And during the pandemic, a lot of builders were like, we don't need any help. I got so many buyers coming at me that I can't even deal with them. Well, that has shifted.
yeah.
As we all know, the market is shifting, and it is shifted. And now for the last, I guess, 7, maybe 8 months, builder confidence is going down. And doesn't mean the new construction buyers aren't out there. They are, but builders are not as overly confident as they were. So we're kind of in a sweet spot right now as a real estate industry, and Hoodle is in general, as well. But realtors that are stepping into this, there are builders that want your help. There are developers that want your help, and there's new construction buyers that want your help. They just don't know who you are. They don't know that you
Yeah.
have made that decision that, hey, I'm gonna own this for my market.
Yeah. Exactly. And so if you have some time here, because you mentioned something that I did want to elaborate on, or want to have you elaborate on it. But you mentioned there's a realtor that kind of went through the system, and they ended up listing like entire neighborhood lot, or there's ways to do that. So I'm not very familiar with how that works, and I'm sure people who listen to it might have caught on to that and are like, what does that mean? So maybe you can kind of just elaborate on how that works, or what that means, of like how can somebody go in here and just kind of list an entire neighborhood, and because that's probably a pretty big commission check if that all gets sold, right?
Well, so a couple of ways to frame this, as we get into that topic is,
Yeah.
one is that, if you drive by a new home neighborhood, typical new home neighborhood in any market, and there's 100 homes that are going to be built and sold in there, one thing to be aware of is there's 100 commission checks that are already attached to those 100 sales. Okay. Even if the house hasn't been built yet, when the builder and the developer creates the neighborhood, they're planning on, we're probably going to have to pay, and they have to, that's the only way they can think about it now, is we're going to end up paying a commission check to 100 realtors to bring the buyers here. Okay. They can't price it. They have to build that into their price. Okay. Here's a second thing to be aware of that most realtors don't know. There really, truly is no price difference for the buyer if there's a realtor involved or if there's not. A lot of times realtors will say, well, the buyer can get the house cheaper if they just go with the builder. It's not true. It is absolutely not true. There are certain salespeople that will try to, do like a shell game and try to, make you think that, but that's not true. Now, the builder gets to keep more revenue, which they should want to. I mean, that's their job is in running a business. They want to keep more, they want to have more profit, right? We all do. But the thing you need to know is they're already planning to pay a realtor commission. So it's just whether or not we step into that and get the commission. The other thing that I think is when you start to think about new construction, you have to realize that, if you think about being a used home realtor, right? You're essentially dealing with two databases, if you will. Okay. And I mean, it sounds kind of geeky, but you're dealing with, and you're, as a broker, your job is to bring those two things together. If I've got a buyer, right? So I have a database of buyers, I have my little Rolodex or whatever of buyers that I'm working with. And the database of properties is already available. It's called the MLS. And so I just go look on that database of what's available properties and, click, pull up the 30 that are available or 15 or whatever it is these days. And I've got my buyer and I go start showing them houses, get them qualified and match them with the right house, and away we go. New construction is different because you're not dealing and really with used homes, pre-owned homes. You're primarily focused on one database, and that is the database of the buyers. And every once in a while, you get a listing, right? Your listing goes into the database of supply. You're dealing with supply, and the buyers are the demand side. With new construction, it's way different though, because you've got now three databases you're dealing with. You've got buyers, you've got the builder side, and you've got the neighborhood side or the developments, the individual lots and the home sites. And there's a ton of opportunity in that most people don't get. That when you're doing new construction, a lot of times you might list a neighborhood, and instead of going and finding the home buyer themselves, you go find a builder who's willing to buy 10 of those home sites and build homes on them. And so I don't know if that's making sense, but the builders also don't know where they can build. We would assume, I did, that, and it wasn't until we, really started getting big as Hoodle that I had builders who were calling me up going, I'm on Hoodle because I don't know where all I can build in my market. And so we assume that, well, they're a builder, they must know where the neighborhoods. They don't. The realtors don't know, the builders don't know, the buyers don't know. And it's just, to me, it was like, we need to step up our game here. This is a big problem for all these parties. We can step into it at just super unique value and solve big problems that we're going to get paid for and be highly valued for. So, but when it comes to like new construction, so we've had realtors that will go in and they go meet with a developer who the developer's got this whole neighborhood and literally, we've had realtors that go in and meet with a developer who's got a neighborhood, and maybe they've got 15 lots that are available in the neighborhood. And the realtor will, after one or two meetings, sometimes it's like on the very first meeting, the developer's going, hey, why don't you list the whole neighborhood? I want you to market all of these lots. I've got, 14, 15 lots, and go ahead and take care of these, but I want you to be my exclusive realtor on all of these transactions. So now in that case, it's too much for us to get into today, but there's different ways to do that. You could go market those lots to the buyers and say, hey, buyers, here's a cool neighborhood, would you like to build this kind of house? There's a lot of different ways to do that. Or the other thing you can do is you can go find a different type of buyer, and that is the builder. Because does that make sense? So you go find a builder who's going, oh my gosh, yeah, I need more places where I can build. And you align with the builder and you help that builder get in. And let's say they buy 5 or 10 lots. Guess what? In a lot of cases, once you've helped them as a buyer, the builder has become your buyer, or they're buying the lots.
Right.
And then you end up listing the builder's houses along with it.
Yeah.
So it becomes exponential growth very, very quickly once you learn the process.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. So now, like, it's like essentially like a lot of different parties, right? And just to make this clear, there's the developer who has the lots, there's the builders who need the lots to build on, there's the realtor who's you in this situation, and then there's the buyer who's going to need all of these things in order to have a house built. So I mean, like the way that you kind of talk about it is, if you're really into this, if you really understand how all this works and are able to provide that value, then there's like I think 3 or 4 different transactions you can just get from that, like one lot listing, right?
Oh, yeah. In a lot of cases, you're making money on the lot, when you
Yeah.
sell the lot itself, then you list the house, you're making money on the
Right.
listing. And we've got realtors. I just interviewed one of our affiliate realtors last week in our private group who I mean, she's really taken it to, and a lot of realtors are starting to do this, but
Right.
she's going in and she's meeting with builders. And after 1 or 2 or 3 conversations, she's walking out where she is their exclusive realtor. And so the builder is listing their neighborhoods with her, their houses, even to and raising her commission too, where she's like, I'm going to do all these things for you, but we need to charge you more. And the builders are willing to do that. And so they're raising their commissions, even to the point where, like she was telling me the other day, she's got builders that if a buyer comes to the builder, so as her client, right, she turns them into a client, she's listing all their houses and their lots and their neighborhoods. And if buyers come directly to the builder refers the buyers off to the realtor. So the builder doesn't, builders like, not only are not trying to cut her out of it, they want her to manage the whole buyer side. You qualify the buyers, bring them back to me, I'll pay you commission. She didn't even start with the buyer. So it's just a different way of thinking about it. It's incredibly powerful. And there's a lot of stories I could tell about it, but we could go on all day too for
Right.
that.
Yeah, no, I mean that is definitely really powerful, and I mean after everything that we kind of talked about and we've learned in this conversation here, I mean I think there's plenty of opportunity, and there's only opportunity there if you do it correctly. So after all of this, after hearing about all the different possibilities, I mean, if a realtor wanted to learn more about this, what are some ways that they can reach out to you or learn more on your website, Hoodle, or if there's anything that they can get more information from, essentially.
Yeah. So thank you. So first, as a realtor, you need to go check out Hoodle, and you need to be aware of Hoodle because there's nothing else like it. It's not like Zillow or Realtor.com or anything else. I mean, it really is. It's about realtors being at the center of adding value to the new home transaction, and it really is becoming kind of a hub nationally. I mean, right now we're started in 80 different markets, and so you need to be aware of it. Because if you're doing new homes or whatever, you don't want to be like, oh, I've never heard of that. You better know about it before the builders do and the developers and the buyers. The second thing I'll say is that, on the website, a lot of realtors are like, well, I don't see where I can join. Well, that's on purpose because we don't just want just any realtor joining up. So you have to reach out. And, if you want to join up as a realtor, we do webinars. In fact, I do training webinars just about every week for not just our people that are part of Hoodle, but just realtors in general that want to know about new construction. I'm doing training almost every week. And so we do webinars, teach classes. We got a Facebook group for realtors that are interested in new construction. It's called New Home Niche Blueprint. And so right now, I think there's about 1,500 realtors. There's actually a lot of builders that are joining it as well. And when you start to get into this, you start to realize that the builders want to see this happen. They want to see us as an industry, as realtors, they want us to step up our game. And, when we begin to raise the bar, they begin to respond to that, and they're very thankful and appreciative of it. And it's just a different relationship. But there's the New Home Niche Blueprint group that they could join. They can always reach out to me on Facebook or on LinkedIn, either one, and connect. And I'm happy to either invite you to the group or if somebody needs a strategy call, a lot of times I'm available to do that. Really depends on the schedule that week, and I'm always willing to help people. And there's also Kobe. We did a report on the 7 major problems that new construction buyers have. And maybe I could give you a link to that afterwards, but it's at the website for that is newhomenicheblueprint.com. And you can download this free report, and there's 7 videos that go along with it. And anybody that if you want to specialize in niche in anything, if you want to become a thought leader in new construction, anything, one of the first things you have to do is to begin to discover the problems in that thing, in that space. And so the problems that in new construction are very definable, and you should go download that report, read through it, watch the videos, and then instead of avoiding those, begin to step into it. And one of my mentors said, evangelize the problem. Stop sidestepping the problem and start recognizing the problem, and very quickly you become viewed as being the change maker and the differentiation. And so any of those places are good places to connect up.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And just 2 really quick questions. Is Hoodle available to realtors in essentially every market here in the U.S. currently, or?
Every market in the U.S. We've got realtors that are joining all over the U.S. Every week there's, people, I mean, last couple of weeks there have been people in Utah, and there are people in
Awesome.
different places in California, and I think Seattle, and, I lose track of where it is. As we move forward now, what we're doing with Hoodle is, of course, we're growing, our team's growing. We're driving more and more traffic to it, adding more services to the realtors, more services to the builders and new construction buyers. And so one of the things we're doing moving forward is really starting to create more like core teams in each market. So with the realtors, we'll always have a very exclusive group. In other words, every realtor can use Hoodle, but it'll be an exclusive number of realtors who are part of Hoodle that are getting buyers off of the website and able to offer more value to a builder or land developer using and leveraging the Hoodle tools. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, it's available all over the United States.
Okay. It's available all over the United States. So it doesn't matter what market you're in. If you're listening to this in the US, you can reach out and learn more about this. And the second question, really quick, is no experience. I know you guys are very, you guys will vet every realtor, but essentially no experience required. Was like you have to have, at least 12 listings or 8 listings in the past month or something like that. Or
No, in fact,
okay.
one of the things we've seen, and it surprises me sometimes, because sometimes though I see brand new realtors that will go in, and they're not going in with a lot of baggage and preconceived notion and all these, realtors don't like, or builders don't like me. And they get in and they start learning and doing it. I really think, and we've noticed some realtors jump into this and they start moving very, very fast. They start getting listings, they start getting sales, they start positioning themselves as a thought leader in their local market.
Mm-hmm.
And some others don't. And, I sat down with the team not too long ago and really started to try to analyze that. Well, why is this person moving fast and this one's not? And it really comes down to personal, just motivation, just
Right.
taking initiative. A lot of people are, they wait and wait for the next year, and they want to learn. Well, I need to go to more classes. And it's like, dude, get out there. We show you everything you need to do, every single step, but ultimately nothing's going to happen until you go pick up the phone or go meet with a builder.
Right.
I just had one 2 weeks ago that called me up, and she went and met with one of her first builders, and she couldn't believe it. And she told them what she was doing. She told them she specialized in new construction. And this is like the vice president of sales, vice president of marketing. And they're looking at each other going, we want to talk to you. Would you come back and meet with us? And so it's huge. It's absolutely a huge difference. But
Definitely. Yep. I mean, I think people should just learn, share as they learn is what I would say. Just document what you're learning. And then as you're doing that, that's just taking initiative, right? There's no replacement for that, like you said. But this is awesome, Ron. I mean, I've learned a lot myself. I think our listeners are getting a lot of value out of this. So if you're listening to this, you got value out of it, give it a thumbs up wherever you're listening it to. Share it with somebody that you think will benefit from it. Because this is a problem everywhere, apparently. So share it with other realtors that that are interested in this, that are on your team, if you're a team leader, some of the agents that want to specialize in this. But I mean, thanks so much for doing this, Ron. Anything you want to leave with the audience before we sign off here?
Um, I guess just this, if you've been called into this industry for whatever reason, and you have chosen to become a realtor, realize that there are big opportunities for you. And um, one of the things that all realtors have to do moving forward is to start to figure out where you're going to niche and specialize. And one of the problems that most realtors face is they haven't done that. New construction, in my mind, is the best niche. If you're not intimidated by going and meeting with people, which and you're open to it. Yeah, if we're not meeting with people, it's gonna be hard to do business. But if you are, feel free to reach out. I'm real transparent and always try to stay available, and we'll give you any help I can possibly give you to get going. So
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Ron. That was a great message. Thank you for being on the podcast as well. And for those listeners tuning in, thank you for tuning in. And I will see you guys next week. Take care.